At the helicopter testing grounds of a major aviation corporation, a young CEO stood beside a brand new prototype aircraft. Her designer heels echoed sharply across the concrete as she examined the sleek machine, a $20 million masterpiece of engineering. Beside her, a man in a simple janitor's uniform quietly wiped down the cockpit windows, his movements steady and precise. She glanced at him with a mocking half-smile. "Fly this helicopter, and I'll marry you." Laughter erupted instantly. Employees pulled out their phones, eager to capture the moment. But the janitor didn't flinch. He simply smiled, calm and unreadable. 10 minutes later, the engine thundered to life. The helicopter rose into the sky, circling with the smooth confidence of a hunting eagle. It banked, rolled, and dove in flawless, controlled maneuvers that left the entire crowd speechless. When the aircraft touched back down soft and steady, the hangar fell completely silent. The janitor stepped out of the cockpit. His name was David Cole. David Cole was 40 years old, a single father, and a man who had once commanded the skies. He used to be a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, an instructor in the Tactical Flight Division. He trained some of the best helicopter pilots in the country. Flying used to be his entire identity, purpose, pride, and duty wrapped into one. But that was before the accident, before the training exercise that went wrong, before the injury that ended his military career and forced him to trade his flight suit for a janitor's uniform. Now he worked at Aerosky Corporation, mopping floors and cleaning glass. Nobody knew his past. Nobody asked. To them, he was just the quiet maintenance guy who showed up early, left late, and never complained. His daughter Emma was 9 years old. She had her mother's smile, though her mother had been gone for 3 years now. Cancer had taken her quickly, too quickly. Emma was David's entire world. Every morning before school, she would hug him tightly and say the same thing. "Daddy, you don't need medals to be a pilot. You'll always be my hero." David kept his old pilot ID card in his wallet. The edges were worn, the lamination peeling, the plastic yellowed by time. Sometimes he took it out and looked at it, remembering a different version of himself, a man who felt confident, respected, and necessary. At Aerosky, preparations were underway for something big. The company was about to unveil the Valkyrie V9, a cutting-edge helicopter with an advanced autopilot system. It was supposed to revolutionize the industry, but there was a problem. Nobody wanted to test fly it. The engineers were brilliant with computers and calculations. They knew every line of code, every bolt and wire. But actually sitting in that cockpit and trusting their own work, thousands of feet in the air, that was different. Fear had a way of making even the smartest people hesitate. Victoria Hale was 30 years old and already running the entire corporation. She had inherited Aerosky from her father 2 years earlier. Beautiful, intelligent, and ruthless. She had an MBA from an Ivy League school and zero patience for what she considered weakness. To Victoria, employees were resources numbers on spreadsheets, tools to be used. She especially looked down on the cleaning staff. They were invisible background noise in her empire, unnoticed unless something was dirty. The Valkyrie V9 sat in the testing hangar like a sleeping predator's sleek black metal, curved glass, and technology most people couldn't even comprehend. Victoria stood beside it in a tailored business suit, arms crossed, staring at her team of engineers. They shuffled nervously, avoiding eye contact. David was nearby, emptying trash cans and wiping down the observation windows. He moved quietly and efficiently. Years of military discipline made him notice everything, the tension in the room, the fear in their eyes. He understood it. Flying something new always carried risk, but he also saw something else. The helicopter was beautiful. The rotor system was perfectly balanced. The design was clean and smart, like the machine wanted to fly. Whoever built this knew what they were doing. Victoria's voice cut through the silence, sharp and cold. "We launch in 1 week. Someone needs to test this aircraft, not in the simulator. The real thing." Nobody volunteered. She scanned the room with open disgust. "I'm surrounded by cowards." David kept working, but a tiny smile tugged at his mouth. He'd heard officers talk like that before, fear and insecurity dressed up as leadership. It never worked. Emma's words echoed in his mind. "You don't need medals to be a pilot. You'll always be my hero." Maybe not medals, he thought, but he still knew what he was. And seeing that beautiful machine sit unused felt wrong, like watching a caged eagle. He finished his shift and headed for the exit. Tomorrow would be another day, another shift of being invisible. He had no idea everything was about to change. The next morning, tension buzzed through the hangar like static. Victoria had called an emergency meeting. Her heels echoed against the concrete floor as she paced in front of the Valkyrie V9. 20 engineers stood in a semicircle, looking miserable. "Let me understand this correctly," Victoria said, her voice dangerously quiet. "We have spent 3 years and $40 million developing this aircraft. We have media coverage scheduled. We have potential buyers flying in from 6 countries, and not one of you has the courage to test it." An older engineer named Daniel Reed cleared his throat nervously. "Ms. Hale, with respect, the autopilot system is completely new. If something goes wrong at altitude, the manual override might not respond fast enough. We need a professional test pilot, someone with military experience, who..." "We don't have time to hire an outside pilot," Victoria snapped. "You're all engineers, not pilots. I understand that, but somebody in this company must have basic flight training." Silence. Near the back of the hangar, David was cleaning the windows of the observation room. His back was turned, but he heard every word. He'd seen this situation before. Pride versus reality. It rarely ended well. Without really planning to, he spoke. His voice was calm, almost casual. "Maybe you need someone who's both." Every head turned. Victoria's eyes locked onto him like a spotlight. Her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to something close to amusement. "Excuse me," she said. David set down his cleaning supplies and walked closer, keeping his movements slow and non-threatening. Old habits from diffusing tense situations in the military. "You said you need someone who's an engineer and a pilot," he said. "Maybe you're looking in the wrong places." One of the younger engineers laughed out loud. Others joined in until the sound rippled through the group. "Oh my God," someone whispered. "The janitor thinks he can fly." Victoria tilted her head, studying David like he was an odd specimen under glass. A smile played at the corner of her mouth. Not a kind smile, but the kind people wear when they're about to be entertained. "You," she said slowly, "you think you can fly a $20 million aircraft?" "I didn't say that," David replied evenly. "You said you needed someone. I'm just pointing out that you might be making assumptions." The room erupted in laughter. Someone pulled out a phone and started recording. This was going to be breakroom content for weeks. Victoria stepped closer. In her heels, she was almost eye level with him. Her perfume was expensive. Her confidence was absolute. "Tell you what," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Fly this helicopter successfully, and I'll marry you." More laughter. Someone actually clapped. Daniel shook his head, embarrassed for everyone. David looked at Victoria for a long moment. His face showed nothing, no anger, no humiliation. Just the same calm expression he always wore. Then he smiled. A real smile, the kind that reached his eyes. "Deal." The laughter stopped. Victoria's smile faltered, just for a heartbeat. She hadn't expected him to agree. "Wait," Daniel said, stepping forward. "Ms. Hale, we can't actually let him." "Why not?" Victoria cut in. She was committed now, playing to the crowd. He accepted the terms. "Let's see if our janitor has hidden talents." She gestured dramatically toward the aircraft. "Well, show us what you've got." David walked toward the Valkyrie V9. The crowd followed, still amused, but now a little curious. This felt like better entertainment than reality TV. Someone muttered about calling security. Another whispered that they should stop this before someone got hurt. Victoria lifted a hand. "No, I want to see this." David circled the helicopter once, running his hand along the fuselage. He checked the rotor system, the tail boom, the landing skids. His movements were methodical, precise. People started to notice. He opened the cockpit door and climbed in. The laughter faded, replaced by an uncomfortable silence. A few people looked genuinely worried now. Victoria stood with her arms crossed, multiple phone cameras pointed at the helicopter. This, she thought, was going to be social media gold. The arrogant janitor who thought he could fly. Inside the cockpit, David slipped on the headset. His hands moved across the controls with quiet confidence. Switches flipped. Systems hummed to life. The instrument panel lit up like a Christmas tree. Daniel's eyes widened. "He's actually starting the engine," someone whispered. The rotor began to spin slowly at first, then faster. The whine of the turbine grew into a roar. Wind blasted across the hangar floor, sending papers swirling. Victoria's hair whipped around her face, but she didn't move. She just stared. The Valkyrie V9 lifted off the ground 6 inches, 1 foot, 3 feet, then rose smoothly into the air, rotating gently as it climbed. David's hands were steady on the controls. The helicopter responded like it was an extension of his own body. He took it higher 50 feet, 100. Then he banked left in a maneuver that made several engineers gasp. The Valkyrie rolled through a tactical turn that only military pilots practiced. Then another. Then a controlled dive that brought it low over the hangar before he pulled up sharply. It was beautiful, aggressive, perfect. When David brought the helicopter down for a landing, it touched the concrete so softly that the landing skids barely made a sound. The engine powered down. The rotor slowed. Silence fell over the facility. David removed his headset and climbed out of the cockpit. He walked toward Victoria, who stood frozen, her mouth slightly open. Nobody laughed now. Victoria stepped forward, her heels clicking loudly in the quiet. "Who are you?" she whispered. David reached into his back pocket and pulled out his worn leather wallet. He opened it carefully and removed a laminated card. The plastic cracked and yellowed with age. He set it on the nearby table. Victoria picked it up with shaking hands. Her eyes scanned the text, then froze. She read it again. Lieutenant Colonel David Cole, Instructor, Tactical Flight Division, United States Air Force. The words hung in the air like smoke. Daniel pushed through the crowd and gently took the card from her. His face went white. "Oh my God," he breathed. "You're that Cole." David said nothing. He simply stood there, hands in his pockets, letting them process the truth. A younger engineer frowned. "I don't get it. Who is he?" Daniel lifted the ID card like evidence in a trial. David Cole trained half the military helicopter pilots in this country. He was one of the best tactical flight instructors in the Air Force. He flew combat missions in 3 different war zones. He has more flight hours than everyone in this room combined. The silence deepened. Someone's phone slipped from their fingers and clattered to the floor. Victoria stared at David, her expression cycling through shock, embarrassment, and something that looked a lot like pain. "You've been cleaning floors," she said slowly, "for 6 months. You've been working here for 6 months, and you never said anything. You never said anything. You never asked." David replied simply, "But why?" She gestured helplessly toward the mops, the buckets, his uniform. "Why are you doing this? You could be flying. You could be instructing. You could—" "I needed a job," David said quietly. "I have a daughter to support. I'm not cleared for military flight anymore after my injury. The commercial airlines wouldn't hire me without recent civilian certifications, and I couldn't afford to get them." He nodded toward the walls of the hangar. "Your company posted a job opening for maintenance staff. I applied. You hired me." He met her eyes directly. "I've been grateful for the work." The words hit Victoria like a slap. She had hired him. She'd walked past him hundreds of times without really seeing him, without knowing who he was. One of the engineers who had laughed the loudest earlier stepped forward, his face red with shame. "Sir, I apologize. We didn't know. We had no idea who you were." David turned toward him. His voice stayed level, but there was steel beneath it. "You didn't know I was a pilot. That's true. But you knew I was a person, and you laughed anyway." The engineer dropped his gaze to the floor. Victoria cleared her throat, her voice smaller than before. "The accident," she asked softly. "What happened?" David was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice sounded distant, like he was watching an old memory play out in front of him. "Training exercise went wrong," he said. "Mechanical failure. I got my crew out safely, but I took shrapnel in my left leg during the crash. It healed, but not well enough for active duty." He inhaled slowly. "The Air Force retired me with honor, gave me a medal, gave me a handshake, sent me home." He paused, eyes focused on something far away. "My wife was already sick then, stage 4 cancer. She died 8 months after I got back, left me with our daughter and medical bills I'm still paying off. The hangar was so quiet, you could hear the wind outside. So no," David continued, "I'm not here because I want to be. I'm here because I need to be. Because Emma needs food, a home, a father who shows up." He shrugged slightly. "Pride doesn't pay for those things." Victoria's hand went to her mouth. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes, though she tried to blink them away. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. David shook his head. "You didn't know my story. But here's the thing. Ms. Hale, nobody in this room knows anyone else's story either." He pointed toward a man in his 50s. "Daniel, over there. He worked his way through night school while supporting 3 kids. He gestured toward the offices. Megan, in accounting, is a single mom with a disabled son. He pointed toward the warehouse doors. Alex in shipping lost his brother last year. He looked around at all of them. Everyone here is carrying something. Everyone is fighting battles you can't see. That's why you treat people with respect. Not because of what they can do for you, but because they're human. The words settled over the group like a weighted blanket. Several people were crying now, including Daniel. Victoria wiped her eyes. "The helicopter," she said softly. "You flew it perfectly. How did you even know the controls?" David allowed himself a small smile. "I've been cleaning it for 6 months, remember," he said. "I studied the manual during my breaks, read the engineering specs. I saw the design and recognized good work. Whoever built this knew what they were doing. I trusted it. But those maneuvers," Daniel added, "those weren't standard patterns. Those were combat tactics. Old habits," David admitted. "I wanted to test the stress limits, see how she handled aggressive inputs. Your autopilot system is fine, by the way, but the manual override is even better. This aircraft is ready for production." Victoria looked from the Valkyrie V9 back to David. "We have our test pilot," she said firmly. "If you want the job, I have a job," David replied. "Maintenance." "Not anymore," Victoria said. Her voice had regained some strength, but it carried something new: respect. "As of right now, you're our chief test pilot. Full benefits, a salary that actually reflects your skills, and I want you consulting on our pilot training program." David hesitated. "I need to think about Emma, my hours, my schedule." "Whatever you need," Victoria said quickly. "Flexible hours. Work from home on paperwork when possible. We'll make it work. Please, we need you." She swallowed. "I need to learn from you." David studied her face and saw something genuine. There's something humble. Maybe she could change. Maybe all of them could. "I'll think about it," he said. He picked up his old ID card, slid it back into his wallet, and headed toward the exit. The crowd parted silently to let him pass. Just before he reached the door, he turned back. "Ms. Hale," he said, "about that marriage proposal." Victoria's breath caught. David smiled, a warm, kind smile this time. "I think we should start with coffee." The video spread like wildfire. Someone had been recording the entire encounter. By that evening, a clip titled, "Say You Mocks Janitor. Then He Flies a Helicopter Like a Legend," was trending worldwide. 10 million views in 24 hours, then 50 million. The comments exploded. "This is what happens when you judge people by their uniforms instead of their character." He protected her ego even while she humiliated him. That's class. The way he called everyone out about respecting people. Chills. News outlets picked up the story, local, then national, then international. Aviation experts analyzed the footage of David's tactical maneuvers, calling his flying textbook flawless and absolutely fearless. The internet wasn't just celebrating David, they went after Victoria hard, her social media filled with angry comments. People called her out for the way she treated employees. Old clips resurfaced of her making dismissive remarks about service workers. The hashtag "Do you know your janitor" started trending, with people sharing stories about overlooked employees with extraordinary backgrounds. To her credit, Victoria didn't hide. 3 days after the incident, she posted a video. No makeup, no fancy lighting, no scripted talking points. Just her, sitting in her office, looking tired and real. "I was wrong," she said simply. "I treated David Cole with disrespect. I've treated many of my employees with disrespect. I made assumptions based on job titles instead of seeing people as individuals. That stops now." She took a breath. "Effective immediately, I'm implementing new policies at Aerosky. Every employee, regardless of position, will have quarterly one-on-one meetings with management. We're increasing wages for our service staff by 30%. We're creating a scholarship program for employees who want additional training or education. And I'm personally apologizing to every person I've wronged." The video went viral too. Some people praised her accountability. Others remained skeptical. But it was a start. At Aerosky headquarters, things changed quickly. The engineers who had laughed at David were required to write formal apologies, not private notes, but public statements posted in the company newsletter. Most did so with genuine remorse. A few quietly resigned, unable to face the shame. David accepted the position of chief test pilot. On his first official day, The entire staff gave him a standing ovation in the cafeteria. He looked deeply uncomfortable with the attention, but Emma, sitting beside him, was beaming. Victoria had invited Emma to the office that day. She knelt down so she was eye level with the 9-year-old and handed her a small box. Inside was a detailed model of the Valkyrie V9. "Your dad is the bravest man I've ever met," Victoria said softly. "But I think you already knew that." Emma hugged the model to her chest. "I told you," she said proudly. "He doesn't need medals." Victoria smiled, a real smile this time. "You're right," she agreed. "He doesn't." Later that week, Daniel approached David in the hangar. "I've been working here 15 years, Daniel said. "You've been here 6 months, and you taught me more about leadership in 5 minutes than I learned in my entire career." David shook his hand. "We all have something to learn," he said, "and something to teach." 1 week later, Aerosky held the official launch event for the Valkyrie V9. Media from around the world packed the hangar, cameras everywhere. Spotlights gleamed off the helicopter's polished black surface. Victoria stood at the podium in a simple grey suit. Somehow, she looked different, less polished, more human. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "Today, we're launching an aircraft that represents years of innovation and hard work." She paused, then shook her head slightly. "But I want to talk about something more important first." The crowd quieted. "We often celebrate achievement without acknowledging the people behind it," she said. "We praise success while ignoring the sacrifices that made it possible. We see positions instead of people." Her eyes found David, sitting in the front row with Emma beside him. "Our greatest innovations don't come from titles or degrees," she continued. "They come from humility, from dedication, from people who keep showing up, even when no one notices. Today, I want to honor a man who reminded me of that." She gestured toward David. Lieutenant Colonel David Cole sacrificed his military career to save his crew. He endured personal tragedy while raising his daughter alone. He took a job he was overqualified for because he needed to provide for his family, and he never once complained, never once asked for recognition. The room was completely silent. "He taught us that dignity doesn't need recognition," Victoria said. "That strength can look like gentleness. That heroes sometimes wear janitor uniforms." She smiled, and there was warmth in it. "And no," she added, "I won't be making jokes about marriage proposals again, unless he flies for us one more time." The room erupted in laughter and applause. David shook his head, grinning despite himself. After the speeches, after the media interviews, after the celebration died down, David found himself alone in the hangar with the Valkyrie V9. He rested a hand on the helicopter's smooth surface, his voice quiet and reflective. "I used to fly to protect lives," he said softly, "to serve something bigger than myself. Then I lost that. Lost everything, it felt like." He exhaled. "But I learned something in those years of being invisible, of cleaning floors while people walked past without seeing me." He traced his fingers along the curve of the fuselage. "Dignity doesn't need wings to soar. It doesn't need recognition or applause. It just needs you to keep going, to show up for the people who depend on you, to treat others with the kind of respect you want for yourself." He smiled to himself. "I still fly," he whispered, "but now I do it for different reasons. For Emma, for the people who believed in me when I was invisible, for myself to remember that I'm more than my worst days." Outside, the sun was setting. Golden light streamed through the hangar doors. In the doorway stood Victoria and Emma, watching as David climbed into the cockpit one more time. The engine roared to life. The Valkyrie rose into the amber sky, silhouetted against the sun like a promise, like hope taking flight. Subscribe if you believe humility is the highest form of strength.